All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call, please. Oh, sorry. You can sit down first and then go ahead and do it.
Morning, Steve.
Are you there?
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Daniels.
Here.
Frost. Gaylord. Guerra. Hanson.
Present.
Harris.
Here.
Kennedy. Lee.
Here.
Natoli. Peters. Cerna.
Here.
Terry.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, which we'll have led by Dr. Ayala.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Clerk with the TV announcement, please.
Yes. The meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse cable system. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Saturday, February 24th and Sunday, February 25th at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board should fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to the Air Pollution Control Officer's report.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning. Very good to see you all here. We have a few things to share with you, upcoming events as part of the APCO report. And then, in addition to that, we have an informational item, a presentation for you all, where we want to discuss for you some of the cap-and-trade investments that are coming to the district. I think you've heard us talk in the past about some of the additional investments that we think the region needs. But to be fair, that we are getting additional funding in the ongoing process of the cap-and-trade investments and some of the other incentive programs that the state is handling. So what we wanted to do with this particular presentation is just to give you a sense in terms of some of the areas where we are going to be putting to work some of those cap-and-trade investments to clean up our sources. So that's coming up. Let me share with you just a couple things as part of the APCO report. So the first one is a recent memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement that we have signed between the Sacramento Air District and the Air Resources Board. And this is pertaining specifically to controlling methane from some of our local sources. Obviously, methane is a greenhouse gas. It's included in the basket of greenhouse gases that the state is trying to control. It is a potent greenhouse gas, several times the potency of CO2. And the state has a target of 40 to 45% reduction in methane emissions from the oil and gas sector in particular, and this is to be achieved by 2025. The connection to district activities is that this particular sector, these sources, are also sources of VOC emissions. So that's how we come into this source. And by mutual agreement, the Air Board and the districts have determined that it makes sense for us to be the ones to implement and enforce these new requirements, and that's the reason for the agreement. We're not the first. There's a handful of districts that have already signed the agreement. There's a few more that are still taking action, and as you can see here in the bullet, we have a little time in that implementation, and permitting will not start until the first of the coming year. So again, we just wanted to make you aware that the agreement is in place. And the state is providing some funding, very modest funding for us to be able to do this. So we're happy to enter into this collaboration with the state and try to control a very important greenhouse gas. The second thing I want to share with you is something that should be already familiar to you, because the clerk of the board sent a note to the board, and that is related to an upcoming public meeting that we are going to be hosting next week, evening meetings on the 26th and 27th. And this has to do with returning to the community and sharing the findings from a study that the Air District conducted specifically on wood smoke particle pollution. The study was designed to be an assessment of pollution in terms of particles during the winter, when obviously we see wood burning. The EPA gave us a grant to do this, and we contracted with Sonoma Technologies. And what is unique about this study, and is fortuitous because it directly correlates to some of the things that we are expected to do under AB 617, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what is unique about this study, and you should be aware of that, and the credit obviously goes to the staff that put this together, is the study is one of a handful, only a few, that actually has a very strong community outreach component. Typically when you do research, you got the scientists, you got the technical folks, they go out, they do their thing, they come back, they analyze the data, and then they publish results. What is unique about this study is that there was a very strong community engagement element beforehand, meaning reaching out to the community and asking, what do we need to do? What are the concerns that you have from your perspective? And then what we are doing next week is, at the back end, now that the study is concluded, we want to go back to the community and actually share what we found. This was about understanding and comparing our disadvantaged communities, our EJ communities, and how pollution in those communities compares to non-EJ communities. And the bottom line from the study is that from the wood smoke winter perspective, we don't see a big difference. That means that when it comes to this source of air pollution, it's distributed regionally. We don't see a difference between EJ and non-EJ communities. And again, this is important. And we're going to use the findings to inform us in our AB 617 activities. Again, the meetings are coming up next week, and then the last one is going to be on the 1st of March at our offices. And what we want to do is, we're working with our contractor, and next month we want to bring to the board a brief presentation to share the findings from this study.
Can I ask a question about
Please.
that? So I understand we'll get the full report next month. According to the slide, this is post study, right? I'm curious to know whether or not the study explored wood smoke as it relates to campfire activity associated with unsanctioned camping in the parkway. Okay. And the reason I ask that is just doing my own windshield survey of things and crisscrossing that part of the district I represent pretty frequently, especially at night during the when it's cold like it is now. It lingers in the air. You can smell it. It's irritating. I mean, literally irritates the eyes. And that's if we're not looking into that in terms of understanding the true condition of wood smoke in our community, we need to start thinking seriously about that. It's a problem.
Hi, Mark Lautzenheiser, Division Manager of the Program Coordination Division. It was our group as the little foam falls off the microphone there. It was not specifically designed to look at camping type activities that were going on and campfires associated with them. When we do come and show you in the full presentation in March, you'll be able to see the specific areas in which we were setting up the monitors. These monitors were set up, though, in combination with our several of our existing stations, but also then a lot of monitors in actual residents' backyards. We even have one of our board members, Director Carr, was kind enough to offer up his location, his residence, to have one of these sited there. And so to that extent, to the extent that we're able to see where those mapping locations relate to the locations where people may have been doing more camping activities and burning for warmth in those cases. It will give an indication, but it was not specifically targeting those areas along, say, the river and things of that nature.
Did we have, I appreciate that, did we have any monitoring equipment that was anywhere near the Northgate Gardenland neighborhood, for instance?
I can take a look at that, and we can make sure we include that as part of the
Where
March
it was
report.
thick, real thick last night.
So you said the Northgate Park area?
The
Or-
Gardenland, Northgate area, right near the Garden Highway, between roughly Northgate and I-5.
We'll take it as an action item for us, and one thing that we can do is, as part of next month's report, we'll think about your suggestion, Director Cerna, and bring you some ideas in terms of how we could address that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that's a community activity coming up. The next one is also a community meeting, and this is related to AB 617. And again, I'm using AB 617 as shorthand for a long list of activities, new mandates and expectations that the state is putting on the air districts. One of the requirements, one of the expectations from the ARB is that we have a very strong community engagement aspect to these upcoming and new air monitoring activities. And you may recall that AB 617 is specifically designed to address the disproportionate burden of air pollution, lingering excess pollution at the community level. And we want to specifically understand our disadvantaged and EJ communities in terms of the added burden from toxic and other emissions. So one of the main elements that this is going to entail is going to be new monitoring requirements for the air districts, and we are currently working on that. And next month, again, we'll be talking about that in more detail. We are undertaking analysis to understand our region, where these disproportionate impacts may be, what the source of those impacts are. And because we have to propose a list of sites for the air bore, that is something that we want your support on. We want to make sure that before we submit the plan for the state board, that this board has an opportunity to comment and to consider what we are proposing. I do have to make this point, that the fact that we are being asked, we as a district, and we're not the only ones, all districts are impacted similarly, we are being asked to undertake new monitoring activities, and there is no designated funding, permanent funding for these activities. The state allocated some money to get us going in the first year. The understanding that the districts had with the administration and the state was that the funding was going to continue, and that is not reflected in the current budget for 18-19. So I have to share this with you because this is something that is going to be a challenge for us. We are going to go out and raise expectations from our communities that things are going to be done, and then we're going to have to think about very hard how are we going to continue to support these activities if the state indeed does not provide the adequate funding.
Welcome to local government.
Indeed. The first public meeting for this particular project is going to piggyback on the other meeting that we're having on March 1st. So that's designed, in the first part, we'll talk about the toxic study from wood smoke, and then we'll follow, since we'll have the community, the members of the community there, we'll talk about what we are planning to do for AB 617.
Really quickly, Director Daniels, you had a question?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding rude, what's the point? So we determined that we have bad air in a disadvantaged area, and what's the point? Or what are we going to do about that? Or are we going to get to a point to where we say you can't burn your wood there, and then we actually negatively impact those folks because they don't have money for electricity or gas? And then what's the point? We don't care about people who are not in disadvantaged areas. They can go ahead and breathe bad air. I'm just kind of concerned about what's the point? What is it going to get us to, and why are we going to spend the money to make that determination unless we know what the point is at the end?
No, that's a fair question, and we'll get into some of this detail next month when we bring you the full presentation. But at the highest level, AB 617 is basically intended to do the following. Identify communities in your regions that continue to have excess pollution exposures, and then use the cap and trade revenues to try to tackle and clean up the sources that are responsible for that pollution exposure. In our particular case, and I'm glad that you're raising the point about wood smoke, our biggest source of air pollution is transportation sources. You know, it's the trucks, it's our traffic, it's our busy highways that are impacting the communities that are near there. So for us, for the Sacramento Air District, what is likely going to be is identification of hot spots near these major corridors, and then using the investments to try to clean up trucks and buses and cars. This is going to be not an activity in terms of restricting wood burning, because, again, one of the things that we found from the previous study on toxics is the fact that transportation sources are the main source of air pollution. So this is very general, but that's really the thinking behind the funding that is coming from 617. The state itself, ARB, is holding public sessions throughout the state. And they are going to different regions. They want to engage the community. And again, the expectation is that we, the districts at our local level, do the same. So this is part of that. This is part of raising awareness and making you aware of what's happening, so that when you hear from your constituents, at least you have some idea of what is happening, because AB 617 is fairly expansive. Go ahead.
Just to add on, just real quickly on that, what the wood smoke toxic study has shown is that from a toxics perspective, the wood smoke is not our major contributor. For that, it is our mobile source issues. From a wintertime particulate matter standpoint, it is still the fireplaces, but the 617 is focused a bit more on the toxic side. So just to not lose sight of the fact that wood smoke is still a contributor for our wintertime PM 2.5 problem, but 617 is focused more holistically than that. They're looking at toxics, they're looking at overall attainment, and from that perspective, it's mobile source driven.
So the last thing I'll say on this is just a little bit about process again. So we are going to talk to the board next month to present a plan, the results of our analysis in terms of our understanding of communities. And we made a lot of progress. So I hope you agree that you're going to be pleased with the analysis that we've done in terms of identifying the handful of spots in our region that do need additional attention and certainly investments. The reason we want to bring it to you is, again, because the plan from the districts is due to the Air Resources Board in April. The state itself is going to undertake its own process, and the expectation is that by October, the ARB will be considering the state plan. So that'll include the individual districts all proposing communities to monitor. Obviously, this is going to be an ongoing activity. We're going to have an identification of communities year 1 that is likely going to be modified year 2, 3, and so on. Hence, the issue of funding to support this. You know, we're going to hit the trigger, we're going to kick this off, and we're going to need to think hard in terms of how to maintain these activities. The networks and the community actions, the monitoring that we're going to be suggesting and proposing to the ARB are expected to be up and running in 2019. So that's another challenge with AB 617. Very aggressive timelines. But we'll try our best. And again, we're collaborating very constructively with the Air Resources Board, with the other districts. We think this is obviously a paradigm shift in terms of community exposure and air pollution. And obviously, we agree that this is a very good use of the cap and trade dollars to try to identify the priority communities that still have impacts from lingering air pollution. My last point here is really simply a segue to those of you, the board, who attended New Partners. As you know, we, the staff, were fortunate to be able to attend the conference. We had 5 board members that attended. 4 of them are here today. So what I would like to do then is turn it over to you, and maybe you can offer to the rest of the board and us maybe some observations and the key takeaways from what I thought was just an excellent, excellent convening. I certainly learned a lot.
So we have, whoever wants to start. I have Director Hansen up on the lectern, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I'll go.
Do you want to go first?
Do you want to punch?
It'll start.
I know. I'm trying to train you. Good morning, everybody. Not everything is easy today, apparently. I wanted to just make a couple comments. I thought it was an unusual thing for us to be able to have the new Partners Conference in California, especially in Northern California. It's been about 20 years, I think, since it's been in Northern California. So it was a very easy way to connect, particularly with a lot of Northern California people around the issues that were being talked about. And that's, everything we're debating at the local level right now around transportation, transit, housing, homelessness, air quality, infill development, sustainability issues. But I thought what's always most interesting is the dialogue between people who have differences of opinion. And the most insightful session was this juxtaposition against the Utah Speaker of the House and how he saw the importance of transit, not just for air quality, but for economic purposes because of congestion, with the mayor of Gary, Indiana. And they had different takes, but they had a similar conclusion about it. And he was a staunch Republican, but she was obviously a woman of color, Democrat, but they presented in their own way the value proposition for why you don't have to make these partisan issues, and the conference is certainly not a partisan conference at all, but I think we often believe that there's some dichotomy between the rural, suburban, and urban communities about how these things happen. So I thought that was the most inspiring moment. And then there was a little side discussion too in one of the breakouts about YIMBYs and NIMBYs, and the Bay Area is roiling with, challenges around those issues, and it was fascinating to see that conversation.
Thank you. Mark?
I just want to say it was an outstanding event. It's really nice when you can network with other agencies and other people with similar problems. The things that really impressed me the most were how traffic's being handled back east. They're kind of playing catch up with a lot of things we're doing here in the Sacramento region, and it was really impressive. With that, they also had ideas that we should start looking upon. I was going to send notes to you. I'm actually not prepared in that respect, but it was really impressive, and like I said, the networking was outstanding. I really think it's, without overstepping my bounds, it's actually a better event for us to go to versus the League of California Cities. That's getting a little stale for me, at least.
Good. Thank you. Vice Chair Guerra?
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo everything. I think the big highlight and the closer was that Utah conversation, and just the ability that they were able to go and do and push for a funding program that funded commuter rail, active transportation, light rail, and also looked at the key pieces of roadways as a system. And that was the big takeaway, is that for too often we look at it's public transit versus roadways, and what the takeaway on the Utah example was that they have to look at all our assets as a functional system, and I think that was a big piece. The second piece was, I think that we need to start taking a look at there was a panel conversation on the autonomous vehicles and where that's going to go, and actually the dangers of increased congestion. So even if we do get autonomous vehicles that come in and we have the increased congestion, we're not going to completely eliminate all of our fossil fuel burning vehicles. Those vehicles, along with, say, these electric vehicles, are going to be on these roadways stuck in congestion because there's a very high likelihood that autonomous vehicles are going to exacerbate congestion, since we'll no longer have to put up with the Highway 50 Watt Avenue intersection in the 59 intersection. So I think those are some big key things, and not only that, but that the time frame of some of those challenges are much closer than we actually anticipate.
Yeah, I guess I would echo what everyone said, and this was my first time attending this conference, and it's great that it was in San Francisco, and we couldn't have had better weather. But it was, the conversation, I spent most of my time on the housing track, just because my day job, that's what I'm kind of interested in. But the conversations were rich. It was interesting to see people from very different settings. So, I mean, there were people from rural Hawaii and Alaska and other places like that struggling with the exact same things that we're struggling with in a large metropolitan community. But a lot of the innovations, whether it was autonomous vehicles or a lot of these market disrupting companies. So Airbnb, we heard from at one point. We heard from it wasn't Uber's Lyft, and talking about what they're doing to the market, but also what value they're bringing. You know, you go up to Lake Tahoe and you realize, you know, there's no affordable housing, there's no housing stock for the people that are living there. But then you juxtapose and you look at what Airbnb is actually doing to helping seniors age in place, and that, you know, 45% I think of their new business owners or people that were participating in Airbnb were seniors and seniors of color. And you look at what kind of income that does to the point of, you know, an elderly person not having to move into a retirement home, and kind of what that means for, you know, this economy that we've been talking, or that we're seeing change, like you said, at such a rapid pace that you know, autonomous vehicles are not as far away as we think they are. This new economy is happening to us today, and in 3 years will look a lot different. I think they even said Lyft was 5 years old or 4 years old. Like he kind of threw out that, you know, we did our first ride, you know, 6 years ago, and we're a $1 billion company. You know, the rate of change is happening so quickly. But yeah, no, it was a great time, and hopefully they keep doing it. I hear that they were struggling to get some sponsors this year, so kudos to the city of Sacramento for actually sponsoring too. And I think the Air District did too, right? Yeah. So with that, I think I was the last one. Oh, Director Frost.
Sorry, I was a little bit late in the conversation, but I also went to the Smart Growth Conference, and sounds like everybody's touched on a whole lot of the good things that happened. I was only there for a couple days, so I missed the last day. But the networking was amazing. I was able to talk with other policymakers in other states and discuss ways that they're dealing with tough issues, like at all levels. So that was awesome. And I was also interested in the housing track, just based on, you know, we have a lot of challenges in our region with affordable housing, not just with homeless people, but with our senior citizens. And I am faced with that in my district. So that was a particular interest, the solutions that people are coming up with for how we can change our living spaces so that they seem bigger, but yet they're so much smaller. And so it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. Some of these new pods and new ideas are pretty exciting, I think. And so it was not the first Smart Growth Conference I've been to, but it was a great conference and worth being there, and I'm very thankful to live in Sacramento, where everything is half the cost. I'm blown away at the cost in San Francisco. Everyone in San Francisco, if they knew how reasonable it was here, they would want to move here, I think. So thank you.
I was going to say, a lot of them have figured that out. I think that's one of the reasons we have the fastest growing appreciations of values and rents in the country. And so with that, do we have anything else for the, no? Okay.
Director Terry, we have a member of the audience who'd like to speak on the APSO report.
Okay, let's take that now.
We have, excuse me, Frederick Gale.
Yes. Frederick Gale, 7336 Hurlong Way, North Highlands. I was really interested in the conversation you had before, and it kind of reminded me, I think from a history lesson or something, we were talking about Paris and London in the 1800s, how polluted they were. and water. Nobody took many baths. They used
Sure, I just want to remind you that the taller microphones to your
Okay,
left.
did you hear me?
Actually, use the other two.
The other, oh,
Those ones,
fantastic,
yeah.
fantastic.
Those will pick you up a little bit. Thank you.
Really a history lesson and how we deal with pollution. We know that at one time, coal and wood, especially for the poor people in areas, that's what they use for that. But we have some examples of some of the things that we accomplish these things. We transition from one to the other. Most of you probably remember Mr. Moses when he redid New York. And we can do the same thing here. And in the study, we could use resources, mud, PG&E, as the use, or whatever type of sources of heat that we use. Something we can look at that, and I would hope that would be a meeting in North Highlands. That's where I live, and the person that mentioned the traffic coming from Folsom on Ward Avenue all the way to the county line, around 4 or 5 o'clock, you cannot hardly move there. But everything has a price. We had Rancho Seco, which was going to, and it's been sitting there for years doing nothing. But you have to be very careful. But I would like to have one of those monitors in my yard if it isn't too large or something like that. But don't forget North Highlands. You know, McClellan's is right across there, and the other wrecking yards we have had in the past. But I think this is something great we have to deal with, and we say we like a wonderful city to live in. I live in the county, but Sacramento is the whole thing. This is where the action is, and thank for my board of supervisors for being what they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar, and we have a public comment for the consent calendar as well? Okay, let's go ahead and take that first.
I have David Modisette with Breathe California.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Dave Modisette. I'm the new CEO of Breathe California, Sacramento region, and I'm speaking at item number 1. And really just to thank the board for our ongoing and growing partnership with the district. We've been working very, very closely with Dr. Ayala and the staff on the variety of programs under this grant. Particularly, I mean, just coincidentally, Dr. Ayala and I started in our respective positions about 8 months ago, but we've been working very, very closely during that time, particularly with the Cleaner Air Partnership in Sacramento on a project that Dr. Ayala mentioned to try to bring more cap and trade dollars to the Sacramento region to help clean up our mobile sources and provide cleaner air. The other projects we've been working on under this grant are the Clean Air Public Education projects in Sacramento schools, the Clean Air Awards, the Youth Media Awards, which is going to be this coming Saturday evening, and our food waste recycling program, also called Food to Fuel, because we generate biogas, renewable biogas from food waste in the Sacramento public schools. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you, let you know that we're working very, very closely with Dr. Ayala and his staff, and we really appreciate your support. Look forward to working with you more closely in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, do we have any other public comment for consent?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. A motion by Cerna, a second by Guerra. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Calendar carries. And we will move on to item 7, Mobile Sources Investment Strategies for Community Air Protection. Who's got this one? Okay. Come on. I'm bumping in my camera.
Just give me 1 second. There we go. There you go.
Great. Good morning, board. My name is Jaime Lemos. I'm the program manager for the Mobile Source section. and I'll be presenting today on mobile source investment strategies for community air protection. I'll be focusing on health basis for mobile source investments strategies, prior and future mobile source project priorities, and next steps. So last month, the board heard about cap and trade investments and the health impacts of toxic exposures in our communities. Most toxic exposure in Sacramento is related to mobile source emissions. The metro areas have the highest concentrations of mobile source emissions because more people are near most of the roadways. On the map, the yellow highlights the community health needs assessment, which is data based on zip code and hospital data. This data was collected by Valley Vision. And the blue section is the Cal EnviroScreen 3.0 data for disadvantaged communities. Investments in cleaner transportation are fastest, most effective approach to generate the needed emission reductions in our community. The district mobile source programs have traditionally prioritized regional air quality improvement, and our programs have been relatively modest in overall funding. We have prioritized higher mileage vehicles and high usage equipment projects, not necessarily community level projects. The legacy programs that we see here, there's some funding information there. $3 million per year. These focus mostly on semi-trucks. The Moyer, $4 million per year, mostly on ag tractors and locomotives. And the goods movement, $10 million per year, focusing on semi-trucks and locomotives. Now the future. We're looking at CCAT $9 million, focusing on school bus, transit bus, public work trucks. And the public work trucks are vehicles that serve our communities, not just public agency vehicles and delivery vehicles. We're looking at funding infrastructure with Moyer funds to support CCAT vehicles, municipal construction, ag, and light-duty scrap. You're familiar with our car share. We're planning on expanding the Our Community Car Share program and adding the ride-hail component. We're looking at submitting a proposal for the Clean Cars for All, which is formerly known as the EFMP program. And this is where community members can turn in an old vehicle for a cleaner or zero-emission vehicle. In addition to that, we're looking at alternative transportation funding, like transit cards and other forms of transportation. The Community Air Protection funding pot, we're looking at a Tier 4 capital corridor locomotive. And finally, the Farmers pot, which focuses on ag vehicles and ag trucks accessing metro areas. In addition to this, the state also has funding available. Here's the table for school buses, transit buses, public works vehicles, and semi-trucks. And then there's many other tables for other different types of vehicles as well. But as you could see, the funding is pretty generous, with an increased amount on disadvantaged communities. Next steps. The staff is working with local businesses and end users to identify optimal projects and investments. We'll be holding public workshops for each vehicle category. Our first workshop on zero-emission school buses was on February 8th of this year, and we had over 60 attendees. And finally, CCAT guidelines for board approval and other investment updates in March. So, thank you.
Any questions for staff? No, we're good. Thank you. Dr. Ayala.
So again, just to emphasize for the board, what we wanted to do is just to give you a sense in terms of the types of projects that we are hoping to be able to fund with your communities, your constituent businesses, and private citizens. As I said, we are working, and Mr. Mata said, pointed out the fact that we are working very proactively to try to bring more cap and trade funding to the region, because clearly the demand we have totally outstrips the funding available. But again, to be fair, we are getting additional support, $10+ million that we want to put to strategic uses to try to help us mitigate the sources. So again, I want you to have a balanced sense in terms of some of the activities related to the cap and trade funding. And again, we very much appreciate that the program is here because it's going to generate some really good opportunities for us.
Thank you. Director Gare?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I wanted to also really thank the staff for their proactive nature, and particularly with the forum, with the school districts. I think if we're going to be successful as a region to capture as much state funding to help us address some of these issues, it's going to be a big learning curve for all of our different local agencies, whether they be schools or cities or local governments, to participate and pooling in and getting as many applications in and being aware of these dollars. And I think the fact that there's so much generous dollars with school districts, I mean, between whether it's from the east end of the county and the region to out here, that's the kind of activity we want people to be thinking about, is like be proactive. And so I wanted to appreciate that, and I didn't want that to be lost of the staff and your staff's ability to maximize our efforts by not just this agency going after dollars, but encouraging other agencies to tap into those resources.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for staff?
Yes, sir.
Oh, Director Cerna.
Thank you. I was going to save this for board ideas and comments, but since we're talking about cap and trade investments, I haven't heard any mention yet, maybe you were going to do it at the end, about the March 1st event with the Clean Air Partnership and the fact that that's intended to be a summit of sorts, really focusing on our legislative delegation as the intended audience, to let them know that the past ad hoc efforts to affect decision-making at the state, whether it be at ARB or with respect to Strategic Growth Council and other agents of the state that have a decision to make when it comes to certain pots of funds associated with greenhouse gas reduction monies, that's going to change. We're gonna have a very new day, I hope. But I'm confident based on the fact that I've been involved in some of these early discussions leading up to the summit on the 1st. So I would ask our Air Pollution Control Officer maybe to say a few words about that, and again remind him that he's on TV, so it's kind of broadcasting out there to the broader audience and those just here in chambers about that important event.
Yeah. Thank you for that important segue. I was actually going to come up to you and do a personal invite and reminder. Many of you actually got an email from me very recently, but Director Cerna is right on target. One of the key events that our Clean Air Partnership has put on is coming up March 1st. Not to be confused with the other March 1st meetings. There's a lot going on right now, but this one is particularly important because our key audience is our state elected officials that represent the region. So this is a handful, the dozen or so senators and assembly members that represent us, you. And as Director Cerna pointed out, we have been making the rounds, going to sit down with these representatives and their staffs, and making the point that we are a region that is poised to achieve bigger and greater things if we are given the opportunity to invest strategically the cap and trade funding. And I want to make a key point because it is very important. This is not just about our share of the pie. This is not just about getting our fair share of the money. This is about identifying communities in our region, in your regions, that continue to have excess exposure to pollution. Okay, just because we don't fit the cookie cutter definition of a refinery and a bunch of communities around it doesn't mean that we don't have communities that could use the investments that we are trying to bring to the region. That is really what this is about, and it starts with the folks at the Capitol that represent us, because they are the ones that are engaged with the administration, with the other agencies in the budget discussion process. When the cap and trade funding bucket is determined, then they go to work and start debating where should the money go. And as you heard me say before, last time around, 95% of it went to 3 regions. And we don't agree that that is the right way to invest cap and trade dollars, because again, for the climate program to be successful, it has to work everywhere, not just in 3 regions. And that is really what we're trying to do, get us mobilized, and clearly we need your participation, and that's why we're reaching out to you, because you as elected officials, not only do you have a sense in terms of how to engage with our state representatives, but clearly you know your communities best. And that is the argument that we keep making to the Air Board. That is the reason why the air districts with you play a key role, because you are the ones that has a better sense in terms of your communities and the needs and where we can invest strategically. So that is what is happening March 1st. I'm going to hand out the flyer that you got through my email. You've seen it before. I wanted to just remind you, we are taking registrations as we go. It's a week from today. And we do see that as a key seminal point. And we are very fortunate that Senator Dr. Pan has agreed to be the champion for the convening so that we can discuss what we call the playbook. How are we going to change the conversation so that in the next chunk of money that is already being debated, that our region gets allocated what we need to help our communities in terms of mitigating air pollution. So that's really what's about, and I thank you for the opportunity to emphasize this.
Thank you, and let me just conclude the thought here and issue a very friendly reminder to all my colleagues on this board, but especially those that also serve on the City of Sacramento City Council, that we have a very unique opportunity to be literally across the street from the Air Resources Board. And when we have our lengthy hearings, when it comes time to deliberate at the board about resource allocation, I, as a member of that now 16-member board, 14-member board, would love to see more local interaction, participation, advocacy, when it comes time to make some bold statements, quite frankly, for not just the city of Sacramento, but for the entire region. And I'm just as much to blame, quite frankly, for not coordinating that better. But like I said, I think we're thinking very carefully now about how to do that with some force and some impact. And so, in the coming years, if I can, continue to serve in that capacity, I'd love to see on a regular basis some greater interaction, participation locally with that state board.
Thank you. Director Hansen.
Director Cerner, I really appreciate those comments, and I think we all can take a part in responsibility for what does or doesn't happen, but one of the things that's most likely to ensure success is the support of our staff and making sure we know about those, can plan on them, and have the appropriate information messaging to be able to participate. And I'd also suggest to breathe, since you're still here, David, and I know you've got a couple of your board members, let's use these local elected officials well. I mean, everybody around this table can be a strong advocate, and we do have the Capitol here, but so often we're busy on all the different boards and commissions we serve on. We're part-time, most of us, so we're just trying to make ends meet a lot of times. But with that support and the forward thinking of our staff and partner organizations, I think we could be really powerful. And I think it's a really powerful thought too from you, Supervisor.
Thank you. One last thing. Just some food for thought, and I would leave it up to our chair and to Dr. Ayala. But something to think about would be maybe to change our agenda for these hearings to include a set agenda item, so it's something that regularly appears on our agenda, that is intended to be a report to this body about goings on at ARB or other state agencies relative to our charge on air quality and carbon reduction. That might be something to think about, so we get in the regular thought process and mode of really understanding what's on the horizon next month, what's on the hearing agenda at ARB or Strategic Growth Council or what have you. I think that would be something that would maybe lend some value to this interest to maybe be stronger advocates here in our own backyard.
That's an excellent suggestion, and if we have agreement from the chair and vice chair, we can certainly commit to doing that. That is where we come in. We, the staff, will be collecting that information. And just to make a point to Director Hansen's, I think what we're talking about is greater engagement, but it's about quantity. It's about quality, not quantity, right? This is not about, going to every meeting, taking you all there, but really being strategic in terms of you all have very unique areas of expertise and engagement, and we can do that. That's our role. And that is part of the things that are going to be discussed a week from today, precisely. The playbook has to include us engaging more directly and consistently with our state representatives, us engaging more directly with ARB and some of the other agencies that do have a decision-making role, et cetera, et cetera. So that's certainly what is going to transpire there. And I love your idea. I think it would be relatively straightforward to make it a standing item where when you hear from us, we just give you the highlights in terms of some of the key discussions, meetings, convenings. I think that's a great idea, and we certainly can take on that if we have board agreement on that.
Thank you. Director Guerra had a...
Yes, well, one, I agree with Board Member Cerna here, and I would like to see that on the agenda. But I also wanted to, thank you for the aggressive work, and we had today just approved the contract with Damari Brown, Hicks, and Kessler, which I think is going to help us in that effort to be strategic and to be thoughtful about how we leverage all of our advocacy tools. And every one of our, whether it's the City of Sacramento or the county, we have contracts with advocacy groups. I think for using all of those tools together combined and having them pool our resources, that's, I think, where we're going to be effective, is that we start not just thinking about the agency as one entity, but again, this is from the point earlier, is how do we leverage other local agencies to use their resources to maximize these efforts. But again, I didn't want us to lose sight that this was a strong move. I think the fact that we have we had a thoughtful approach on looking for a firm that had our best interest in mind only exclusively, that's a huge step forward.
Thank you, Director Guerra, for pointing that out, and I'll share with the board. Thank you for your support of the contract. We're very excited to have DBHK with us, and what we want to do is, since you've approved the contract, we would like to have them here at the next board meeting and have them address you and maybe talk a little bit about their vision and some of the opportunities they see working with us. We are their first Air District client. We are very excited as well, because I think they're going to be a fantastic addition to the team. And what we're talking about is multi-pronged, right? It's not just us doing more, you doing more, knocking on doors. It's a really much more comprehensive and complete effort to change the calculus when it comes to getting the necessary support in terms of funding that we need to mitigate our sources of pollution. Bottom line, this is all about public health. It's about identifying and recognizing that even though we've made a lot of progress, we could do a lot more. And if we are just smart about getting those investments to clean up our sources, this can be good. This can be good for our businesses. This can be good for our air quality. This can be good for our citizens, because we are protecting their health. That is really what is driving us. And again, we do need to say that we thank your support and engagement and willingness to approach the next difficult set of discussions in a different way. So hopefully the outcome will be more positive than what we saw last time.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay. So with that, board ideas or comments? Any announcements that we might have missed?
No.
Okay. With that, we will stand adjourned. And we have a budget committee meeting for some of us.
Yeah, so we're going to